My name is Colette Hopshin, and I'm Associate Director for Faculty Professional Development in the Center for Faculty Development and Associate Dean and Associate Professor in the Elber School of Business and Economics. As a management scholar, I am always asking what makes work enjoyable and meaningful, and conversely, what makes work a drag and painful. Organizational change has the potential to be a source of meaning, but also dread for many people. At the recommendation of David Green, director of the Center for Faculty Development, I took a cue from the book The Human Element, written by Nordgren and Chantal, and found it helpful to examine that dichotomy through the lens of friction and fuel. Fuel drives change, and in contrast, frictions resist change. In this video, we are taking a closer look at one type of friction, reactance, and what we can do to minimize it. As mentioned previously, this video focuses on one type of friction, reactance. After we review how reactance is a friction, we are going to discuss two main strategies for minimizing it: asking yes questions and co-design. Both of these strategies fit under the umbrella of self-persuasion. As you are watching and listening, I hope you are taking notes so that we can connect in the future to address any questions or concerns. While Nordgren and Chantal lay the groundwork for us, we know there are plenty more questions to ask and answer, especially as we start applying these strategies in the field. In the Human Element book, Nordgren and Chantal describe our instinct to protect our freedoms. So when we feel forced to do something, we naturally want to push back and assert our autonomy. Of all the frictions mentioned, I had a real connection to this one. I remember a particular instance that occurred when I was very young in my childhood home. I was watching my mother curl her hair when the phone rang. Like any caring, wise parent, before she ran to pick up the phone, she turned to me and said, "Do not touch this curling iron. It will hurt you." I nodded in agreement, but as soon as she left the room, it doesn't take a genius to know exactly what I did. And it didn't take long for my mother to figure it out either, as I went running to the freezer to ice the palm of my hand. I share this story with you because I think it's beneficial to recognize that my mother told me not to do something, and while it bore a clear reactance response from me, her actions were entirely appropriate. She was looking out for my safety. There will certainly be other situations where we have to tell people what to do, perhaps for their protection, and then we'll experience their reactance. But what we are going to illuminate in this video are the opportunities we have to give people choice and release the felt pressure to change. Reactance is most likely to happen when a core belief is threatened. People feel pressure to change, and/or those same people are not consulted about the change. And so self-persuasion, or getting people to see and articulate the value of the change for themselves, is a powerful tool for disarming reactance. What might self-persuasion look like? Here's one example. A study was conducted on hotel guests' recycling behaviors, green behaviors, and it turned out that how guests were told others reused their towels made a significant difference to their decision to reuse or wash bath towels. Specifically, when told that other guests who stayed in their particular room reused their towels at least once during their stay, current hotel guests were most likely to reuse their towels. Notice that the hotel did not force guests to reuse them. One might argue that if they had, maybe stating that they won't provide any new towels and reserve the right to refuse lodging to those who do not comply, then the number of reused towels would have been even higher and therefore yield more desirable outcomes. But that strategy would have also provoked reactance. Most likely unhappy guests who might use up hotel staff time with arguments for why they need new towels and angry Yelp reviews. And it would have also created a more long-term problem. You may get compliance in the short term, so guests will reuse their towels, But as soon as the threat of being kicked out of the hotel is lifted, hotel guests will not have formed their own reasons for reusing their towels and likely go back to their old ways in the long run. In other words, countering the forced recycling program becomes more important than realizing the benefits of recycling, which guests could have carried with them from hotel to hotel and in their futures. If this is sounding familiar, it may be because you're familiar with Robert Cialdini's seminal book where he describes different persuasion tactics, including self-persuasion. In the recycling example, we see the power of social proof, how similar others' behaviors influence how we choose to behave. Notice that this is very different from peer pressure. Peer pressure may sound like a variation of social proof, but with peer pressure, force and threats can be used to enforce desirable behaviors. In the example, current hotel guests are given information, time to digest what that information means to them, and then provided with the daily option of whether to reuse their towels. And lo and behold, they end up choosing a direction that coincides with what hotel management wanted in the first place. In the human element, two routes to self-persuasion are emphasized: asking yes questions and co-design. And so we're going to focus on those techniques next. But if you're interested in persuasion tactics overall, I recommend Cialdini's book, or at least his Harvard Business Review article on this topic, entitled Harnessing the Science of Persuasion. We've just reviewed how telling people how to behave provokes reactance, or maybe compliance in the short term, but resistance long term. So finding common ground is a way to get one's foot in the door and over time build on that initial agreed upon understanding. First, let's acknowledge that the very act of asking a question places us in a very different mindset from telling people what to do. And so that is a major advantage of this first strategy. Next, we must notice that we are asking a particular type of question, a yes question. Yes questions are questions that easily solicit affirmative responses. Nordgren and Chantal use the example of asking people to put up ugly billboard signs in their yards that support driving carefully. The ask is imposing and inconvenient, and therefore unlikely to solicit an affirmative response. In contrast, asking people to wear a sticker that supports the cause is more likely to solicit yes responses because it's a smaller commitment. Indeed, it is so temporary that you can easily peel off the sticker and discard it in the rubbish bin before throwing the shirt in the laundry. Now, once you have that small commitment, you have paved the way for the yes ladder to form. If people have agreed to wear a sticker in supporting of driving more carefully, then maybe they're also open to signing a petition that supports the cause. And after that, maybe naming a contact that they perceive to be on the same page and worthwhile approaching for support. And perhaps even after that, they'll be open to donating money to the cause too. A yes ladder forms and behavioral commitment escalates because people become more open to supporting the cause at each rung of the ladder. In this example, the first rung is asking people to wear a sticker, but it could be even more basic than that, like simply asking someone if they are open to a different point of view. It's just a lot more socially desirable to say yes to being open-minded, right? And voila, you've got the first rung of the ladder established. When you sit back and reflect upon this technique, it wouldn't surprise me if an alarm bell starts to ring. It's possible to see yes questions, or any persuasion tactic really, as manipulation. This begs the question, should I use these techniques? While Nordgren and Chantal don't address this directly, Cialdini argues that persuasion tactics need to be used ethically, and failing to do so will likely backfire, because people can feel when they are being pressured or manipulated. And when people discover the deception, you can bet that any commitment to the change or innovation peters out. Genuine intentions to hear people out, incorporate their ideas, and respect their freedom of choice is tantamount to using yes questions effectively and maintaining one's reputation and long-term influence. This next strategy, labeled co-design, results in a sense of inventorship, meaning that when we use this strategy, individuals feel connected to the innovation or change to such a great degree that they are more inclined to not only implement the innovation, but also advocate for it to others and lead the change initiative. A good example of this is deep canvassing. Through lengthy conversations characterized by empathy and perspective taking, a person can build connection with someone, often a stranger, who enters the conversation with an opposing view. Evidence of effectiveness is when that opposing view is transformed into allyship and impacts behavior, such as changing one's vote or making a donation to the once opposed cause. Deep canvassing is a lengthy process, so if you're under tight time constraints, it may not be the right option for you. And in general, co-design requires a sizable commitment. To form genuine connections with others, they have to feel valued, respected, and welcomed to share their attitudes and ideas. Building such trust is challenging, and if we rush it, we risk losing all the ground we've covered and having our subsequent actions seen as empty gestures and platitudes. In this video, we reviewed how reactance stalls innovation and change. Autonomy is important to individuals, so when we take away their freedom to choose, we are bound to be met with reactance. Often, reactance is expressed in the form of rebellion, meaning that we'll experience the very opposite of what we are hoping to achieve. To respond to reactance, two self-persuasion strategies were mentioned. The first involved asking yes questions to establish common ground and then building commitment towards that shared understanding. The second is a lengthy process that hinges on meaningful conversations so that opposing views are not only heard, but inform what the change or innovation looks like in light of those viewpoints. This is a form of self-persuasion because people's involvement in the design process builds their commitment to the final product. They easily see the merits of the final product and are happy to champion it. Any talk about persuasion would be remiss without some mention of ethics. It is true that persuasion tactics can be used in unethical ways, like lying to people about what others have done, or knowingly building commitment to something that is not in the person's long-term self-interest. To curb this deviant behavior, organizations could lean on well-constructed and publicized codes of conduct, and it would be wise for individual users to become familiar with the long-term consequences of abusing persuasion tactics, including risking their long-term influence and professional reputation. Responding to reactance is challenging, but you are not alone. We encourage you to take a closer look at the Human Element book for more examples and discussion points, and to contact the Center for Faculty Development for more in-depth strategizing.